Hi, George.
Hi, George.
Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday.
It is wine day.
Wine
Cheers
Wednesday.
to you, friend.
Ooh, that was a good cheers.
That was a good cheers.
Oh my gosh. How are you doing, friend?
I am doing great. How are you?
Fantastic. We're drinking your favorite kind of wine tonight.
We're drinking Riesling. It's
Okay.
been so long. No.
You get to read the
You
wine
already
name.
made fun of me off recording.
Okay, but try again. Go.
I don't want to. Well, I tried to read the fine print, and that's not going to happen again because it's a German word.
I feel like fine print on a wine bottle is like a cool joke from the universe.
Right, especially when it's, I'm pretty sure a city in Germany, but Vollratz is the brand. That's what that says.
Yeah. It's funny.
Vollratz. It's a Riesling. This is a dry Riesling, so it's not very sweet. Is that what dry means?
I'm
It's
not
a
sure.
very tall bottle.
It is a very tall bottle. It didn't fit on my shelf.
I enjoy the art on it.
Yeah, that's nice. I haven't had Riesling in a long time. That's like not one I typically choose, but I like this one.
Mm-hmm. It's not particularly sweet, but I still like it.
I give it like a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, if you want to try Riesling, it's nice.
I prefer a very sweet Riesling, but you have had me on like the Pinot Grigios and the Sauvignon Blanc, so
Changing your palate a little
I
bit.
know. I'm wondering how I'll feel when I go back.
I know. I think I got a coupon code. I think I told you for Wink.
Got a coupon.
Coupon. Do you say coupon or coupon?
Coupon?
Okay, good. You're a psycho if you say coupon. Just kidding. To our listeners.
I know.
Just kidding. Not really kidding.
They need to know where they stand.
I mean, I'm judging you if you say coupon is really what's happening. But I want to try out Wink. I saw that you can like take a little quiz and it tells you like, oh, do you like this? Do you like this? Do you like citrus? Do you not? Like, do you like salt? Do you not? Which, fun fact, I had salty wine in Mexico once. You don't go to Mexico and get a bottle of wine sent to your room. It's salty. It's happened in 2 separate Mexican resorts.
Wine
In
is
2
not
different
supposed to be
places.
salty.
I know. But like we were
Did you drink it?
Yeah, because we had it ordered and sent to our room, and
You should have.
that's how we found out it was salty.
You should have questioned that a little bit.
Well, I
more
told
than you did.
my husband, I was like, why are we ordering wine in Mexico? I mean, it was nice to like have a bottle of wine, but you go margarita.
Do you think that they added salt because you're supposed to have margaritas in Mexico?
No, I think that it was like, it wasn't even really, it was like a white table wine. I don't think they had, like,
You're supposed to drink margaritas.
I think Ryan just like asked them to just like send a bottle of white and said they just like chose like a table white. They didn't send like a specific type. So I don't know.
So they went with salty. Well, our Riesling is not salty.
No, which is great. Anyways, and I would like to try the Wink because you can like the Wink. I don't know. Yeah. So we'll see. But you can like choose 4 bottles to be sent to you.
Okay.
Which is kind of nice. So maybe we can like do the little
Let's do
quiz
this thing.
together next time. And
We'll
then,
do the quiz together and they'll be like, we have no recommendations. You guys said completely different things.
Right, you all are terrible. I don't know. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Anyways,
Are you whining or winning?
I am whining.
Great.
It started out as a win.
That's not the way you want to go.
I know. And I hate to be like all complaining, but it's been a crazy
Complain.
week.
Let's do this.
So, I've been like trying to involve my toddler in all of the chores around the house because she likes it, and it also, teaching her responsibility, those kinds of things.
Said with a big sigh.
The big inhale of just like anxiousness. But so I was having her help me like sort laundry, and I always have way more darks than I do light clothes because I wear everything that's like black. Just like my soul. and I had a pile of black clothes and a pile of white clothes. And she's like, Mommy, the pile for white needs to be bigger. So she went and got my robe, which is white. And I'm like, good job. Like, you figured out, like, it could probably use a washer. So, like, she grabs it and I, like, throw it in the pile. And then she wanted me to throw the load of white laundry in first. So I did, not thinking. That was the win, right? Like, my toddler is sorting laundry. Yeah. She's in it. She's excited about it. The wine is that I just got myself some new headphones, and they were in the pocket of my robe, and I forgot, and I put them in the wash.
New wireless headphones? Like, you just got them?
Yeah.
You just broke your old pair.
I know, and I finally, like, broke down and got new ones, because I'm a cheapskate like that, and then they went in the wash. Now, I did plug them in afterwards and the light turned on, so I don't know if it's still going to work.
Oh,
They're
we don't know,
supposed
like,
to
this
be
just
waterproof.
happened?
Yeah, it just happened before I came over here. I, like, was changing the laundry
no.
over. And so the light on them turned on. I haven't tried to, like, turn it on and see if they work yet. So...
Yeah, does waterproof mean, like, soap-proof?
There is a whole, like a piece of plastic that covers it, where you charge it, and that was closed.
Okay.
So maybe.
I mean, if the light turned on, that's a good sign. Maybe you'll just sound
breath.
like you're in a washing machine all the time now.
Great. That's exactly what I go for in my headphones. I really look for that sound quality.
Wireless headphones are a huge win. Like, I finally got some
after... When they work.
When they work. Because my husband got some for Christmas, and then with my winnings from fantasy football, because we beat out all the guys,
right.
I bought some too. I was like, it's crazy. It's great.
Oh, you're like untethered, and you can even have just one in if you just need like that mom escape when you're like on a walk with your kids, like pushing a stroller or something.
Yeah. You want to still be able to hear what's going on. Well, I hope yours aren't broken, because you've been hurting without them.
I know.
I've had mine for like 3 weeks, and I'm already obsessed.
Well, and I use them for work too, and I use them for like when I'm running and stuff. And so I'm really hoping that they still work, because running with I have like a bunch of old pairs of headphones that have a cord, and that is the bane of my existence, because I'm like a spaz, and I run like I feel like I run like Phoebe a little bit.
I've never seen you run, but you've described it to me, so I assume.
I don't really think I run like Phoebe, although that would be a good visual. But I do somehow always, like, rip the headphone out of my ear. And that's sort of, like, a jolting experience. I don't like that feeling when it's, like, ripped out of your ear.
Yeah, because you're, like, in the mode.
Yeah.
And then it just takes you out of it. I'm going to start driving around our neighborhood around sunset and just seeing.
That's funny.
If I happen to see you running.
I've been slacking this week, though. I did do MK Fit workout videos. Those are a win.
Yeah, you have to.
I've recommended them a million times, but I laugh at myself every single time I'm doing them, which makes it a win.
Yeah.
They have like Hamilton one. I did the 90s breakup anthems. Like, I'm a very happily married person.
No, but you still need to go back to that like teenage kid where you're like
you know why, like, and it's all the things that like so 10 out of 10 recommend.
I was just telling someone I've been rocking out to like Avril Lavigne's like emo from high school. She has
a hit video for all genres. Like, there's musical theater, there's like the booty shaking.
That's awesome.
Like, yeah, it's just, check it out. I'll link it in the show notes. But how about you? Are you whining or winning this week?
I am winning this week.
Must be nice.
I know, right? I mean, I'm kind of winning. I mean, there's some sketchy parts to my win, but my
here comes the karma.
I know, right? No, that's not how karma works. My husband and I are getting very old. I don't know if I've said on here before that we've been together since high school. I think we've probably mentioned it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of a funny thing to like reflect on the stages of life at which you're at. And the stage of life at which my husband and I are at is that every vacuum we own has broken, and we just purchased like a legit like Dyson, it's like rechargeable vacuum
flex capacitor.
It is fantastic. And we have our dog that I've talked about before on the podcast as well. He sheds like crazy. He's a 20-pound little cutie, but he sheds everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had our full-size vacuum that broke, and then we had our sort of handheld vacuum. It also broke, and we're like, great. So we ordered this new vacuum, and it comes in. Battery doesn't work, so we had to like go through that whole process of like, hey, you guys, since faulty battery comes in on Thursday.
Your husband
this week
was very upset. The battery.
He
was so excited about the vacuum.
He was so excited. So this is why it's a win,
He loves
though.
to vacuum.
I know. Well, no, it's because our house has been so gross. Because all of our vacuums have broken, and so we are now at the point in our marriage and in our life that we are so old that we're both like so excited about this vacuum that arrived. So like when it came and we were so excited and it wouldn't charge because the battery was broken, we're like, freaking kidding me. So he got like right on the phone and like fixed it. New battery came. He's like, as soon as it arrived at the door, he's like, I'm going out there to get it. I got to charge this battery. I'm like, okay. And then he like comes down in the middle of his workday and he's like, I think the battery's charged. I'm like, are you just going to start vacuuming right now? What are you doing?
He's like been counting down the minutes.
I am. and he just starts vacuuming in the middle of his workday. I'm like,
and you can't be mad at your husband for vacuuming your house.
He was so excited about it, and I'm just sitting there going like, what has happened? What has happened to our life? Like, we were both legitimately excited about it, and the vacuum is pink, which means that my daughter is also very excited about it. So we're all, like, as a family, like, oh, we have a new vacuum. Our house is so clean. I'm like, what is happening?
Wow.
But I don't care how
this
old
is
it
like
makes us.
the
Win.
air fryer stage of life, like where something as unique as an air fryer / appliance is.
Appliances make me happy. And, like, because our vacuums have been broken, and because we have our dog, and because we got a sandbox for Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's all kinds of stuff coming up in this vacuum that I'm like, man, what have we been living in all this time?
Right. Because I feel like with your sandbox, what I've discovered is, like, there's 3 stages of getting the sand off the kid, right? Like, there's the sand that gets off in the sandbox.
I'm glad this is infiltrated into your home also.
Well, and then there's the sand that, like, once you get out of the sandbox that you can, like, shake off of them and, like, shake them out before they come in your house. And then there's the sand that you watch fall off them as they're running into your home. So, like... Yeah, I feel bad because my daughter's
My husband's, like, vacuuming, and he's, like, looking in the little... Because it's one of the ones that you can... It has the clear...
like canister
thing, and he's like, it's like there's sand. I'm like, are you surprised right now?
I mean,
did you see the sandbox in the backyard? It is sand.
I wonder how that got here.
He's like, no, I think it's dust that's like looks. I'm like, no, it's probably both. But
and we live in a desert.
And like, and the Dysons, like, they're made to, like, agitate the carpet and, like, get all the stuff that's just been in there. So I'm like, even when we had working vacuums, I feel like it's getting all the stuff that's just been in there from, like, having, like, kids and dogs and stuff.
And that's, like, after carpet cleaner, because you use your carpet cleaner regularly
in that room a lot.
Yeah,
because it gets gross because that's, like, where they come in and out. I don't know, but my win is that we have a new vacuum, and it's pink. And it's fantastic, and it does a great job, and my house is so clean now, like, the carpet in here, and my daughter, like, after we vacuumed, she's like, wow, guys, you did a great job, it looks so nice. Like, I don't know if that means we're winning at pandemic life or totally losing our minds, but...
I think that's a win. My kid gets excited about vacuum carpet lines. Yeah. Like, I mean, as them again. You should. Yeah.
We have them again, because we didn't with our vacuums kind of, like, slowly just dying.
Yeah.
Great. So, you know...
I'm excited for you, friend.
Shift in our whole identity since of, like, being in high school and being excited about very different things to now we are thrilled that we have our new vacuum, and I'm happy with the money I spent on it because it was worth it.
You were not exaggerating either. Like, your husband is so excited. He told me the story
downstairs. I went to the bathroom, and I hear him out there going, did you see our new vacuum? Do you know about the vacuum? I'm like...
He's like, and let me tell you what happened. And, like, we went through the battery saga. Yeah.
We have been, like, arguing over who gets to vacuum.
It's like, funny.
I think I'm going to go vacuum somewhere. I'm like, no, you will bathe our children. I'm going to go vacuum.
I one time came back to, it was when I was dating my husband before I knew him, and he had all his family in town, and I came back to the house, and he was sweeping outside, and then he got a vacuum and was actually, like, vacuuming out back, like vacuuming up, like, weird pollen and stuff. But it's like a nervous tick for them. Yeah. They vacuum.
He does start vacuuming at really odd times. But this one's also very quiet, so you can vacuum.
That's good.
Yeah, because we have, like, parts of our house that don't get vacuumed because kids are usually sleeping.
Right, and your husband works upstairs, so and then you guys are downstairs. So that's the nice thing about the wireless thing. It's like wireless. It's not as, like, crazy bulky. You can just run it upstairs real quick or not.
So I'm accepting my elderly status and being super excited about a vacuum with my husband.
There's a comedian that made a whole series about, like, elder millennials, and I feel like that is officially us.
That is where my heart is. Yeah. I feel heard when you just said that.
Like, the community we're gonna move into has a lot of, like, older people, and I'm like, these are my people. Like, they want to drink wine and be in bed by, like, 9. Great.
That is a respectable goal.
Right. And these are my people. Yeah. Well, speaking of my people and who I am, or how we now identify.
Who we now are at 30-something.
Right. We can't even remember how old we are. That's how old we are.
I have to calculate it every time.
And then I have you tell me because I don't want to calculate. Real fact.
It's happened several times.
I thought tonight what we could chat about is just how crazy it can be to try and, like, hold on to your identity or even figure out what your identity is. Mm-hmm. Or define that or be successful in that as a mom. Because I think before you become a mom, you know, you have aspirations and goals and different things. And then, and then when you no matter what your life trajectory
Yeah.
was, when you have kids, things shift, whether
Yeah.
you are still pursuing goals or your goals change.
Yeah.
And for me, that like feels just like the biggest identity shift.
It seemed like it was going to get real dark for a second there. You had goals, and then you became a mom.
And then you chose to reproduce, and life was over. No, I'm just kidding. I love my daughter.
It's like, this is a whole different podcast.
Yeah. No. And so what I thought was just, we could just chat about some of the things we experienced in like that identity shift. Like, when did we know it was happening? Because I think a lot of moms don't even maybe realize that. I think for me, that was a big part of what contributed to my postpartum anxiety, was like I was still trying to function on all cylinders as the person I was pre-baby, but with a baby.
100%.
And I didn't process that, like, my identity shifted. And I was talking to a new mom recently, and she said, like, when did you know that, like everything had changed for you after you had a kid? And I had told her, honestly, I don't even think I really knew until, like, my daughter was about to turn a year old, and I had, like, come to terms with the fact that I just survived a whole year, and I didn't really live it. Like, I was just surviving minute to minute without, I mean, I enjoyed things within that first year, but it just was hard for me. Mm-hmm. And now, if I'm looking back, I remember, like, I had a C-section, and in the operating room, I got really sick from the whatever medicine they were pumping into me. And so I was doing skin to skin with my daughter, and I started to get really sick and like feel really sick. And so they took my daughter and gave her to my husband, and they like took my husband and my daughter went out of the room. And I was like in the room there being like sewn up. And I remember feeling like, oh my God, like my heart is outside of my body with my baby and my husband. And that was the shift, right? Like all of a sudden, like you go from growing this human to now all of the responsibility in the world.
Right.
Also, like, everything you knew totally changed. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of like the moment for me where now looking back, everything changed. Like, that was that moment.
And then you fought it for a year.
Yeah, right.
And then a year later.
Yeah, and then that's like the only time I came to really think about it was like a year later when I started to sleep again. And
well, that's the problem, right? Like, you go through this huge identity shift where you're handed another human being, or two if you have twins. Like, I don't even.
Yeah.
Can't even. Can't even. But you're handed a human being that now you're responsible for their well-being, and you just had a major surgery, and
or like, okay, gave birth,
go. Like,
right.
And yeah, you're like in survival mode for so long that you don't even have a chance to stop and think about what that means.
And I would say, especially for first-time moms, there's no way to even prepare for that.
No.
Like, you can't tell somebody to prepare for something that they don't know how it will be. Like, maybe as a second-time mom, you're like, okay, I know lack of sleep would impact me this way. But again, it's so different. Like, you've shared with all of your experiences that, it was different. You had different pregnancies. You had different experiences in the baby phase. So I don't think there's any way to really prepare for that.
And when you have your second kid, for me at least, I mean, he was better with the sleep, but he still had some struggles with it. But I think that it gives you the opportunity to be a little bit more present in it because you don't have that shock factor of just all of it.
Right. You're not as overwhelmed because it's not the first rodeo.
Yeah, because you at least know the basics. Like, you've changed a diaper before. You've bathed the baby before. Like, I remember being terrified to bathe my daughter.
Yeah.
Alone. I'm like, somebody else should be present in case this goes down.
Right. If this goes sideways, I'm going to need someone to tap in.
She's slippery now. Like, I don't.
She's slippery.
I can't.
She's a slippery little seal.
She's slippery. She can't hold her head up. Somebody else should be present.
She's really floppy. I don't. No one told me she would be this floppy.
She hated baths. Oh my God.
No.
That was the whole thing. But I do think, at least when you're a second-time mom, you at least have that. You at least have the tool belt to work with. Yeah. Even though it's the juggle of two and everything. First-time parent is a very big identity shift.
Well, and I think something that you helped me shed light on that is kind of what prompted me to want to speak about this for like a full episode topic was that I think before you become a mom, sometimes it's really easy to hold your self-worth into things that you are accomplishing. And it of course, it might be tied to your own personality and what that looks like for you. But for me, I was a very like accomplishment made me feel good about myself. And so my like self-worth was totally tied into what are the things you can accomplish? Like what was my GPA in grad school? Like what promotion could I get? Or those kinds of things. And I've said it on the podcast before that when you have a baby for the first time, there's a lot of repetitive things and the clock starts over in the morning where you're like feeding a baby, changing a baby, rocking a baby, and then you do those things over and over again. And then right when you feel like, okay, like we made it through the day and like the baby's sleeping, then you start over.
Yeah. They still need all those things again.
And specifically in pandemic, I had a really hard struggle again, right at the 2-year mark with parenting and all of that because we went into pandemic. And so I was in a groove at work again. I was getting back on track to focusing on accomplishments. And then I reverted back to, so if you're a new listener, when pandemic hit, my daughter is high risk for COVID complications. So we decided to keep her home with us from daycare. And in doing so, I had to watch her full time while working full time. Right. And that then put me at like average pace for working when I had always been in overdrive. And I struggled really, really heavily with feeling like I was failing at everything because I wasn't succeeding at something, or I didn't have some like sort of accomplishment. Exceeding, maybe that's a better word. And like, you reminded me, you're keeping a human alive. Yeah. You're doing your job. I wasn't like failing or doing anything bad at work, but I wasn't going above and beyond like I would typically do. And so you kind of helped me shed light on that my self-worth might have been tied to external things instead of the things that I really wanted to focus on. So what was what did you find your identity was like before kids and what shifted for you after kids?
Yeah. I'm glad you touched on that external piece because that's exactly kind of what we talked about in bringing this topic up with one another is we all get so focused on that external validation and external goals and sort of like box checking of like, yes, I am successful in life because I'm doing this, 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 and this. And it's a real problem for mental health. And I think probably why a lot of first-time moms especially experience postpartum depression and anxiety because we're not, I don't know if it's part of our culture and upbringing, we're not taught to be able to internally validate ourselves. So yeah, I think I had a lot of those external drives as well, as far as my career and my schooling and making sure that I was like...
You've always exceeded at like school and you've always been a really great student and really great in any jobs that you've had and work.
Yeah. So I've always been like, 4.0 plus on the GPA scale and, doing great at all my jobs and making sure, like you said, I'm being average. We've talked about this. Either one of us being average at our jobs is still us probably being a better employee than most humans.
Right.
Because we're always trying to go above and beyond, but you don't get paid extra for that. Like, you just feel better for it.
It was our own drive, like that was our identity.
Because your identity is wrapped up in that, which is problematic for mental health because layoffs happen. Right. Like, life changes like motherhood happens. So you have to find where your internal validation is, which is where I think we'll get to in this episode. Yeah. But for me, you would ask me about, so yeah, I had a lot of that as well, like drive for school, for work, like excelling at everything. For me, as soon as I became pregnant, the boss that I had at that time, I kind of sensed a shift in him of just kind of like writing me off a little bit.
Isn't that shitty that happens? Like, I had so many people change the way that they treated me professionally when I became pregnant. Yeah. It's a very different, it's interesting because this is a very vulnerable state that you're in. And I found myself being like nauseous at work at a point where it was okay to tell people and being like, I have to tell you this. This is why I'm like constantly snacking and inhaling and stuff. And you're trying to like, that's the point where your identity starts to shift as well. Like now I'm telling people, it used to be this little bubble of like me and my husband only know. And then like we told our families and then now everybody knows. Now everybody's in on this little secret as I'm trying to like come to terms with it and my body's changing and you just feel like there's a spotlight on you.
In which, fair enough, I ended up being a stay-at-home mom. So, like, I didn't end up staying in my role. So,
Right.
whatever. I did intend on staying in my role, but once I had my child, my husband and I decided that it worked better for us for me to stay home with my daughter and now with my 2 kids. But I do remember that shift when she first came and just shifting to, I've talked about before, like when I brought her home, I'm like, I shouldn't be in charge of this human. Like,
should someone know that we're here?
Somebody should, like, somebody watching us, like,
where's that village they keep saying helps raise everyone?
What's going on? And my mom did stay with us for a few days at first because I was like, you can't go home.
Yeah, but like a few days.
You know what you're doing. You can't leave.
A few days in that first baby stage for your first baby is not, it's like a drop in the bucket. A few days.
But it was, I mean, I remember watching her because my mom, like, just remembered, like, naturally how to do the things, like, bathe a human and stuff like that.
Like,
that I was memory. Like, okay.
Yeah.
And you kind of start realizing, like, I can learn these things as well. Because I remember as a kid, like, looking to my mom and being like, you just know all the things. How do you know all the things? And just kind of being like, I don't know all the things. How can I be this kid's parent? So I think, as you talked about, I've been a parent for 5 years now. And you talked about over your daughter's first 2 years, kind of how that's evolved. And I think I think you'll experience too. It's like it keeps evolving as you go across the years of parenting, where you feel like, oh, I've kind of now at this point, 5 years in, come to realize, no, I don't have all the answers, but I see why I thought my mom had all the answers, because you are their person that they come to and that they trust. And it's all about creating that loving environment and stuff. So I think that the identity shift was pretty stark in the beginning. And then in that first 12 weeks while I was on maternity leave, where we decided I was going to be a stay-at-home mom, that was a really hard choice because I did have so much of my identity just wrapped up in being a good student and being a good employee and what am I contributing, and
like the achievements that you've been able to accomplish at such a high level.
Yeah. And spoiler alert, having kids, like they will not provide that external validation for you, because on any given day, like some days I'm like, yeah, great, I did great today. Like,
they don't like shoot out an email to your team to say like, wow, she did a really great job on that peanut butter and jelly for lunch this afternoon.
She did great.
Like, kudos.
I mean, my daughter was applauding my vacuuming skills, so you know. But we've come a long way.
The vacuums come full circle for family satisfaction.
But it's that piece of, I've stopped working. I no longer financially make money.
That's got to be an interesting shift for identity.
That was a big shift. And I kind of put down in my notes and thinking about this topic today that I think that's an important piece that not all stay-at-home moms have, is that my husband and I have a very solid foundation, a very solid relationship, and that's never been an issue between us. But for me, it was a little bit of a shift of like, okay, I don't make any money now. Like, that was a big shift. And then not having that external validation that I was used to from parenting, because especially in that first year, and with my daughter, I've talked about before, she never slept ever, and breastfeeding was a struggle. She took a long time to feed, and it was just like I didn't have those things. It was like check, I'm doing all this right,
which catapults you out of your comfort zone
for sure. So I mean, I think probably like you, it was over that whole first year of parenting that you kind of finally came to a point of like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm okay that, it's our shared finances now, like we've merged everything, and I feel more confident in what I'm doing as a parent, and this is always a work in progress. And kind of, I think for me, we've talked about it with you more during the pandemic of finding that internal validation. I think that I've been kind of forced into finding that internal validation earlier on in parenting, because I didn't have the job piece that I was used to pushing that onto, it's like, it's almost like it was like a deterrent of like, okay, well, this thing's going well. But then when you only have the parenting piece, you kind of have to figure out something else to drive you and validate you and be your self-worth and your identity, or so that
you can be the safe place for your kid.
You're going to crumble. Like, you just can't.
Right. And I guess I didn't realize that you didn't make that call until you were in maternity leave. So that's like, a big part of your identity that is kind of done on the fly while
Mhm.
you're like in massive sleep deprivation and all that. So I can imagine that would just be
Yeah.
like a really jolting shift. But you're right, you and your husband do have a really strong foundation where he sees the value in your job, which is arguably
Yeah.
the most important job, which is like raising wonderful humans and like,
Yeah.
you know, which is so sad that like moms struggle with that
It makes
feeling.
me sad that people don't have that, yeah, because that's what makes me feel lucky in the role that I have. As much as the day-to-day stay-at-home mom parenting is hard, I at least have that piece where I know that he appreciates what I do and I appreciate what he does. And so I say all of this with the caveat of I know that not all moms have that.
Right.
It's funny though, because when I think about, yes, I decided in that 12 weeks, I had multiple people before I even had her be like, I could see you staying home. I think you could be fulfilled by that. And I'm like, no, I'm coming back to work. Because again, that was like my mindset of like, no, I should work.
Was it irking to you that people put you in a box like that? Like either way?
No, it was more just like I had one person that I worked for that was like, okay, but if you choose not to come back, because I've seen moms do that before, like it's okay. And like she kind of gave me the permission to be
Which
like,
is a
it's
nice
fine.
way to say that. Yeah.
So she was one of the people that I told first, and then I kind of like talked about how to tell some of the other like higher ups and my actual boss about it. But yeah, it kind of gave you that permission to think about like, okay, well, like that is a reasonable choice. That's a valid choice from somebody in my career field saying like that's okay. That's a choice that people make. Yeah.
I had sort of an opposite experience where the person, I was working closely with somebody who was senior to me, and they were talking about what maternity leave would be like. And they knew very much that I really did want to come back to work because I do like working, and it wasn't, and it's funny to say that because now that like hearing your experience, it makes so much sense that like when you're in maternity leave, everything changes, and it's a totally, you can say one thing dead ass serious until that day happens, and then who knows, it's all different for everybody. But I remember saying something like, oh well, I'd like to take the full maternity leave because you have options, right? Like sometimes you get full pay for a certain amount of time, and then a smaller portion of your pay for like the full 12 weeks or whatever it is.
That's what I had. And
I was saying that I would really like to take the full time because I just think it's important, and for me personally. And I said, but I don't know what it's going to be like. And the person said, yeah, who knows? Maybe you'll be sick of it by then. And they referred to the baby as an it. And I was just like, this is the person who undoubtedly believes I will come back to work and be focused on work.
Yeah.
But do they also then assume that I have this like detachment? Because I think sometimes there's that was part of the identity I struggled with, was people, because I was so worried about being professional throughout my pregnancy. Like, and I would work way too long because I was trying to overcompensate and I didn't want anyone to know how sick I was. And it tied back to my identity, and I was like slowly losing that identity that I was so comfortable with or that I had established. And then hearing the person say it, and I realized how defensive that made me over this baby and this human that I'm growing and already love before meeting them. And I was just like, holy shit, like they think that it's one or the other. And I realized like how much gray area there is for everyone.
For sure.
Because you can be a stay-at-home mom because you want to. You can be a stay-at-home mom because you have to. You could be a working mom because you want to, or you can be a working mom because you have to.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to say. When I heard you say that, it's not that I didn't like working that made me choose to be a stay-at-home mom, but I did have this very, like, visceral reaction to, like, I didn't feel like I should put her in daycare. And with the money that I was making, at least at the time, I was like, I don't know if this trade-off is worth it.
Yeah.
For us in our particular situation. And so we kind of had come to that decision together. And it's a hard decision at first because it was hard at first with the money that we were making at the time. And my husband's worked so hard in the last 5 years as well to like go up the ladder at his work. But it's just, I think you're right. There's a lot of reasons that people make that decision to make that shift. And no matter how you do it, whether you go back to work, whether you stay at home, whether you had to go back or you chose to stay home or whatever, it's such a huge shift. and who you are as a person.
I think it's important for moms that are maybe experiencing that or maybe know somebody who is experiencing that, because as a mom, it's really easy to pay your 2 cents forward and be like, this is what my experience was like. And before you share that 2 cents, like, think about putting it in the bank for later, because those comments can be those are the things that stuck with me the most about like, oh, now these people think I'm changing in this way, or it's presumed that I should do this or I should do that. And I just remember, and I remember you watched my daughter when I went back to work. Like, you were the first person to take care of my daughter outside of me. And when I went back to work, and I remember dropping her off here and like leaving and feeling like questioning, like, am I doing the right thing? And I think that's part of the identity that's hard to like get a hold of, is because there is no right answer. Like there is no, this is what is best for your kid. While I'm sure everyone has an opinion, like it's such a gray area for everybody's unique family. And well,
and I think for you too, like, I think it helped you that you dropped her off with me because you know me so well.
Right.
And
I trust you.
That helped that anxiety piece, but I'm sure that also was a big piece for the identity as well. Of like, also, here's this person that knows me so well, and she's not going back to work. Right. And I'm dropping my kid off with her. That probably
like there was a couple of times where I dropped Claire off and you had like a friend here with their kid. And I was like, and it was another mom who was also like staying home and not working at that time. And I remember leaving and just being like, it was just a weird sensation. It wasn't, I didn't feel like one was right or one was wrong, but I was just, it makes you question yourself because, again, your identity has been totally flipped upside down. Like, how did you, like, what did you do when you realized, like, oh, shit, like, I'm not the same person that I was before?
It was hard. So I think that just, like, using your support systems helps for sure. And I think that we're coming from this from a standpoint of having really supportive spouses, and I recognize that not everybody has that. Right. So I think that being able to talk to my husband about the fact that this is such a big shift, and he was always in it with me too, because again, we had a very hard first year with my daughter, her not sleeping and things like that, like, but we were in it together. It was never like, well, I have to go to work, so I'm gonna go sleep. It was very much like, I have to take care of her all day. I cannot do this all night. Right. And do it all day. Like, it feels like the day never ends. I can't do it. So we kind of had that partnership in it as well that helped. But I think that I quickly came to realize that external validation that I previously had functioning from work doesn't work in parenthood, because they do not give you that. Like, which makes you feel kind of low in that moment. It does. You had to call me on that, and not call me on it in a negative way, but you shared that with me. You were like, it sounds like this is what you're feeling. And because I couldn't explain it, I just was like crying on the phone to you. We were having one of our wine nights and I was telling you, hey, like, I feel so like, I feel like I'm like reeling a little bit because I just feel like I can't get ahead. I can't. And you said it so eloquently, saying it was about the external thing that I was leaning on. Well, and I think for you were doing that motherhood shift, but you also had work. So I think kind of what I was telling you is I think that you have held on tight to that work piece even more so than you were previously. And I don't know if that's something that will resonate with all working moms that are on here. But you had that piece where, like, okay, here's all the things that aren't going well in motherhood, because they never do, because it's unexpected roller coaster that starts over every day. Every day, it just resets. But you had that constant of the work piece, and I kind of have seen you just latch on to that piece and make sure that was going super stellar and well to help you cope with. It was the one thing I could control. The shift of, because you could control it. So I didn't have that anymore. So I had nothing I could control. So I had a lot of hard times because of that too. Not that you didn't. I know you did. No, but that's the thing, is everybody's hard times are hard. Like, it doesn't. It was a really hard shift. It was a really hard shift for me. But I think that I have tried over this time to find that internal validation, and we've talked about anxiety and how that's contributed as well. And I think that I've just kind of come to terms over the past year that, like, over the past 5 years, that a job is just a job. Right. It doesn't define us. It's the work that we do to me, it's the work that we do so that we can make money, so that we can have our time with our families.
Like, work is renting your life.
Mm-hmm.
It rents
but
your
I think
life
for me before, I used to think that like that was the thing that you were supposed to be doing. That was what defined me. That was the thing that was most important, was like the work I was doing. Whereas it's been a few years it's taken me, but I've kind of realized like, no, that you work to make money because the family,
Right.
at least in my experience, my family is what's most like number one in my life that I've realized. And like my husband got laid off during the pandemic. Like jobs can lay you off.
Which talk about identity shift in that situation, the dynamic really for the two of you, because
we had no income and no health insurance for a while. It was great. But he was awesome. Like he put all his effort into it.
Yeah.
Got within 6 weeks, was employed again. He's done fantastic, and it ended up working out really well because he has a job that he's going to stay home now.
It was meant to be. It was like the
forever. Like it worked out so beautifully. So I, again, cannot complain because people have had a much worse situation. But I think for me, it's kind of been that shift of figuring out, like, to me, it's the values that I want to teach my children to value in life. Like we talk a lot about kindness in our family, and just the things that, and how important family is, and how just like caring and loving one another, and that we don't do harm to other people, and that we're responsible for our own actions, and just kind of those values. It's kind of realizing that those are the things that internally drive me, that yes, was driving me to do well at work and all these other things. But those are the things that are actually important, and I still have those things whether I have a job or not.
Right.
So it's not tying it to some sort of like grading system in school or grading system in a workplace, because I don't have that anymore. So it's having to just do it for myself, which is hard.
Right. Which I think too is something you model really well when it comes to parenting your kids. Like, and our kids play together and I laugh and I love how they like interact, and I love how watching you interact with kids, because like I've mentioned this account before, but I follow an account, Curious Parenting, which we've talked about a lot on, they're on Instagram, and they put on so many really awesome ways to reframe your thinking. So I'll link them in the show notes, but there was one that really stuck out to me where it was talking about how praise without judgment can help you combat your child, like fulfilling that cycle of growing up feeling like accomplishment is where their value is.
Yeah.
So like, and because of course, like and I just did this today with my daughter. We're talking about print art. She's making these, Valentine's prints, and I wanted to be like, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. You did such a great job, which then like is going to like long-term lead her to be like, oh, like if I do things this way, I get praise in this way, instead of saying like, look how creative you were, or even still, that's like not a perfect example because I'm still working on the reframing, but it's like, look at those curvy lines where it's like an objective statement.
Creative is a fine thing to say also. Yeah. It's focusing on the process. And I will say, fast forward that a few years, my daughter will be like, Mom, you were so focused on that. Or like, Mom, it looks like you worked really hard on that. So like those phrases, those little like shifts, even if you don't get it right, because I often tell her like, you did a good job,
right. And I
don't have to say it every time, but
it is about also equally doing that as often as you do give praise with judgment, because it's like, of course I want my kid to know I love her and I think she's doing an excellent job, and all those things, but I don't want her to feel like she has to do that to get love or has to do that to feel good about herself. So anyways, I will link that account because there's so many awesome parenting tips, and it has just changed the way my husband and I talk about things, because we will like I see them and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like something we were just struggling with, or talking about what's the best way to handle.
Because your phone reads your mind.
My phone does read my mind. But this particular account, I just am really so impressed with it, and it's just little things. It's just like reframing. Just
little shifts in how you can say things, and it really does make a difference. And just having them find that validation in the process, I guess, which is kind of what I think we're long-winded saying right now. Is the process of parenting, the process of working outside the home, is we forget that part. We're so focused on the results as part of our identity. So how are you doing with that now? Because I know that you've had a big shift in realizing that maybe the work isn't everything.
Yes.
the end all be all to everything, and you're noticing with your daughter that you don't want to teach her that results are everything, but you are so career driven. So how are you meshing all that together right now?
Yeah, it's a weird dichotomy, right? Because I really truly do enjoy work outside of the praise or the good job. Like I like the puzzle of it, and it's something I enjoy doing. Like I don't dread work. Like I dread monotony sometimes in work, but I don't dread my work. I love my job, and I'm fortunate in that way. And just like I would teach my daughter to like lean into the things she loves, I'm also trying to lean into that for myself, because that's part of my finding my identity, right? Is like trying to embrace the things that make me feel good and make me feel happy in exploring. But like this week, you and I were chatting over the weekend about how like a job opportunity has come up, and it's a potential to apply for a promotion, and it would be a really interesting experience. But for the very first time, especially because we're still in pandemic times and I'm taking care of my daughter full time, I have this whole other scope where I'm thinking to myself, what's most important for like our little ecosystem to still function? Because I could take on more stress at work. And under normal circumstances, if I had childcare, I could manage that. But for the first time, I'm weighing in how I will be able to handle that.
Yeah.
And manage my stress effectively so that she doesn't kind of like learn those shitty behaviors that I've accumulated. And that for the very first time has been part of my decision. So every other promotion I've ever taken, it's like work harder, sleep less, do whatever it takes. And that's not a healthy way to go. It's not sustainable.
Well, that's why I said to you, it's like when you were telling me how you're weighing it, I'm like, there's a lot of shoulds that are happening here, whereas like I'm not hearing you weigh all the things that you have said over the last year are important to you. And it's like, it is that mindset of like, oh, here's a promotion, therefore I should do it. But you should be weighing all those things that you're weighing right now. So I'm proud of you for doing that.
Thanks. And so like when it comes to my daughter, as far as like how I'm trying to model that, what I'm trying to do is just like be really aware of what is most fulfilling versus what would get me the most accomplishment or like the most kudos or the most recognition or whatever I would have been prone to in the past versus so like what is fulfilling, because I want her to seek that out and I want her to be willing to work hard for that, but I don't want her self-worth tied to that. So that's what I'm trying to separate for myself, is like, is this about my ego or is this about an opportunity that would be great and I can manage, or is it just about ego and I'm going to sacrifice other things? So I've been really working this week in this situation to kind of weigh, like, I'm going to lay out the terms of what my family situation is and what I need to be able to be successful in both. And if it pans out, great. If it doesn't, that's okay too. And I'm not going to be devastated if that's something that doesn't work out. So, I mean, I guess I feel like very healthy about that decision.
No, that's great. I'm very proud of you.
Like I'm making progress, but it is for any mamas that are struggling with that kind of reverting back to those old behaviors or reverting back to wishing that you had your old identity, or like you're not alone. And nobody has it totally figured out, no matter what your scenario is, what your family looks like, what it feels like, or, every day is going to bring a new struggle. And it's about just being really mindful going into it versus having it all figured out, because nobody fucking has it all figured out.
Well, and I think, that's really important too, because I think when you become a mom, there's this feeling of, okay, now I'm in charge of this other human being. And my mom seemed like she had her act together when she had me. So like, I should have it together too. And it's like, we're all just trying to figure it out as we go. And I think it's important to figure out whether you're staying home or you're working outside the home and doing the parenting thing, which each come with their own identity struggles, which I think in our conversation, at least today, for me, it came pretty early that it shoved me into like figuring out, okay, well, what is my identity if I don't have that work piece that's now been stripped away? Whereas you've had this weird experience in the pandemic where you've been doing both things. Yeah. And you've had that shift now where you've said that you want to try to have more time at home with your daughter and also work whenever pandemic ends, if that ever is a thing. But it's really a shift now too. So I think kind of what we're saying is motherhood is a huge identity shift, and we can fight it or we can acknowledge that it's a big shift, and now we have to work this into who we are now. And I think that there is that piece that we feel like we need to hold on to who we were before, or it's like that resistance to growth in some way. I don't know. It's like we feel like there's it's that resistance to change. We feel like there was this thing that we were before, and somehow we can't let motherhood disrupt that. We have to get back to that, whereas really you have to integrate motherhood into it and look within yourself and figure out what internally validates you. And that's a scary place to be.
It is scary because if you continue to do things that are based on like external motivation, what that perpetuates is you doing things that don't serve you. And so at the end of the day, it comes back to like, everybody knows you have to fill your own cup first. Like, it's been said to death in a million different ways, but it is true. If you are doing these things, it doesn't serve you, and then in turn does not serve all of the things that you are fundamentally really trying to work for, towards your family, for you, for whatever that is, whatever identity that is.
When I didn't accept that until I was a mother, like staying at home with my kids and being like, oh, okay,
right,
I need to actually make time for myself, or I cannot be what you kids see me to be right now.
Right.
I can't do it. So it's true.
Which is interesting from a self-worth perspective, right? Because it's like, we should have felt like we were worth enough to stop and say, like, well, this is not serving me. But until we had another human who relied on us, then we just had ourselves, and we were willing to run ourselves into the ground as part of our identity. And it's like, and I do think our culture is very much set up in that culture of where it's like, you know, oh, we expect women to like work like they don't have kids and parent like they don't work. And like, that's not, that's just not a thing that can't happen. So, being both of those things are a part of your identity. So you have to do the things that will serve you, avoid external motivation, and really ask yourself, like, is that serving you? Yeah. Good talk, friend.
Good talk.
All right, you know what time it is.
It's time for our crazy check.
Crazy check. Woo! All right, do you have a crazy check today?
I do.
All right.
So, I took my son in for his 2-year-old wellness check this past week.
2-year-old crazy check.
Crazy check. It's funny. So I take him in for his doctor's appointment, which like during pandemic times is ridiculous, right? Like you have to, ridiculous in a good, but in a good, like they're doing a great job, but like just the whole process is just crazy. Like
you wait outside,
the masks, sanitizing, just all of it is just such a weird experience. And your kids are like terrified because everybody has masks on and they're not used to seeing humans. It's such a weird experience, but
also taking your kid to the doctor is like running a marathon. Am I the only person who is like drenched and like sweat and exhausted?
No,
like,
it is anyways. And now you have all these other
weird things,
factors that go into it. It's crazy. The world we live in right now is so crazy. But I decided to take him in for his wellness check because I was like, I refuse for him to not get his wellness check because they are being safe. And so I take him in, but pandemic or not, my crazy check is that when I go to my own doctor, I may put off asking questions that I probably should be asking because I'm like, oh, I don't want to bother you. You're busy, which is dumb, right? Like we should all be advocating for ourselves. But with my kids, I'm like, if I have a question about their well-being, I'm going to ask that question no matter how stupid I feel it is.
You better sit your ass in that chair and answer my question,
identity,
lady.
like I will...
Mama
At least I know I asked, right?
Yeah.
Like I can't go home and be like, God, what kind of a mother am I? Like again, this is Jocelyn speaking, the one of us that is a stay-at-home mom. Like that, so much of like who I am is just parenting my kids. I don't have that anything else that's like, that external drive. So I'm like, I can't go to the doctor and be like, well, I didn't ask that question. And now I'm like driving myself crazy over it. And then what am I gonna do? Call them? I don't like to talk to people on the phone. And so I will ask all the questions. And like in the moment, I'll feel like I'm like, okay, like this is fine. Like I'm getting my answers. I'm feeling good about it. But my crazy check is like for literally the rest of the day. This is an anxiety thing. I'm sure of it. I will be like, God, I sounded like a crazy person. Like that doctor has to just be like still thinking about how crazy it was that I asked all those questions. Cause I'm so used to not like we're so used to not taking up any more space than we like need to.
Right.
But especially now during pandemic times, I'm like, okay, here's my questions that I have about his actual well-being, and then here's my 16 questions that I have about pandemic to make sure that like we're doing all the things. So, do you do this as well? Like I come home and I'm like replaying it in my head for the rest of the day. I'm like, God, I know I sounded crazy. I know I shouldn't have asked all those questions. Like
so I don't, but only because I think that like I get overly protective of like my identity as Mama Bear, and I'm like, no, fuck you, I'm gonna ask whatever I have to ask. But I realize that's like my defense of probably because I'm internally worrying that I'm crazy. But
well, and then you probably like go back to work and then you focus on actual things that are like people need you to be focusing on, and I'm just like, I'm just gonna sit here and ruminate on.
Well, we know that I am like a master compartmentalizer, but that is like not the great, right? So, but that being said,
so we're both crazy in different ways.
Yeah, totally. But but what I'm saying is like, so from like a work perspective, the people that I work with, if you that's the only frame of reference that I have. I'm not a doctor. You can call me doctor, but I'm not a doctor. But the people that I complain about to like my husband or my friends are the people that, are asking something in a way that is just flat out dumb.
Yeah.
And not like well thought out or like prepared. Or the people that are, just like too lazy to like,
to do it,
to even be there to start with. Right. So like, you've checked 2 boxes. You've showed up to like be there and advocate for your kid. So like already like I feel like in a doctor, if I'm rationalizing as a doctor, would like go through their day because they probably see 1 million patients a day.
Yeah,
especially during pandemic times, people are panicking. And you're very thoughtful in the way that you have prepared your questions probably, and the way you're asking them is a very respectful, like thorough way. So I would imagine she's probably, or he or she is probably thinking, wow, like this is like somebody who's really thought through advocating for their child. And I would imagine that like the things that stick out are the parents that like said something crazy or named their kid something crazy or
probably,
you know what I mean? Like,
probably.
Like I have like a group of coworkers that we joke that like about things that make us stabby, and like it's always about the most like ridiculous things.
Yeah. That's the thing, like, to me, I'm like, when I actually think about it as my rational self, I'm like, I'm probably not even a blip on the radar because, like, it was a normal wellness check. Like, I objectively asked reasonable questions, but I'm just so not used to just...
Well, there's, like, the deprivation of people interaction, and then you're out. Like, I went to the doctor myself this past week. I had not been anywhere with, like, a roof and 4 walls that wasn't my house or your house since June.
Yeah.
It's February. So, like, I was like, where am I?
Yeah,
what is happening? Like, what's going on?
You're another human? Let me talk to me.
And I was just like, oh, can I talk to you? Like, it's just a very strange thing.
Yeah.
So, I do totally understand how that interaction would, like, drive that, like, angst of, like, was I overdoing it because they're probably under a lot of stress because it's pandemic and whatever. But honestly, like, being a parent who's probably very thoughtful in what you were doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Well, thanks, friend. I do super respect our kid's doctor. Like, she's a fantastic human being, and she never for a second makes me feel like I'm like wasting her time in any way. And so it is probably that like human deprivation factor as well. Like when I get home, I'm like, oh my God, like how did that conversation go? Like I was
at the doctor this week and I was sitting there and I left the doctor and I couldn't figure out like what is going on with me, and like I had this wicked headache. I was trying to smile so hard that she could see my eyes smiling at her like aggressively so that she would like not realize that I was like somehow being standoffish or like because you can't see my facial expressions. Yeah. And again, I haven't been anywhere in so long, so yeah, that's where we landed. But you're definitely not crazy, and it's pandemic. It's
all the pandemic social anxiety on top of my normal social anxiety. I can't be the only mom that worries about this after we come home from doctor's visits.
Definitely not.
We're not used to advocating for ourselves, which is, again, an identity piece. Like, we need to advocate for ourselves. Like, we are important, too. But, like, we will, in a minute, like, advocate for our children.
Like, Mama Bear to the moon and back. But for us, we're like, no, I don't want to take up space.
Well, let us know on our Instagram page if you have these experiences as well and how you're doing with your identity. Find us on the Whining Moms Podcast Instagram or thewhiningmompodcast.com.